Welcome to the Bot Wars challenge page tutorial for the front office challenge. Now, it looks like a lot of people had a lot of fun with this challenge this week. Hopefully you're able to get it figured out. If not, I'm going to show you exactly how I would solve this problem, and we'll get into some different approaches as to how other people may have solved it as well. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to jump over to the challenge page itself. So if you don't have the URL to the challenge page, it's right up here. You definitely can't read that. I will include that in the text below and in the description. But this is our front office challenge page. And so the idea with this challenge is we need to download this CSV that has missing customer data. So when we download that, it gives us a missing customer.csv file. We want to loop through all of the customers in that missing customer CSV and enter their data into this web form. We enter all that data, we hit submit or register every single time. Once we've done that for every time for each customer, we should get our output. And obviously we want to try and shoot for 100% accuracy, and we want to see what our time is as well. Okay, so I'm going to refresh that because it does keep track of your time when the page loads. Let's go to our control room. I'm using Community Edition for this. All of the challenge pages that we have released for Bot Wars, they are going to be eligible for being completed on Community Edition. That's a big thing for us. So you should be able to complete them the same way that I am. I'm going to go to the Automation tab here, and I'm going to create a new folder and a new bot. So let me click on this Create Subfolder. I'm creating a new folder just because I'm going to keep these organized. This is the first week for our Bot Wars challenge pages. So I'm going to call this one Bot Wars, and that's the name of my folder. It's a good practice to make sure to name your bots appropriately, but also put them in subfolders so that when you're looking in your control room, you don't just see this like crazy mess of bots that all have a name that's like test or scratchpad or something like that. I'm going to click this link right here to say create a bot. That will create a bot. Notice in my directory of bots, Bot Wars, so that's fine. I'm going to call this one, what did we call it here? Customer onboarding. I'm just going to call it front office challenge. Cool, and I'll hit create and edit. All right, so when I'm building bots like this, and especially for these challenge pages, but if I'm just building a bot and someone says, hey, I needed to do the following things, the way that I always start those builds is by honestly building out my frame of, hey, this is kind of the template of where I need to put some code, and then I work back through to fill everything in. So I do that with steps. So we're going to do that same process here. So I'm going to scroll down to the steps action. If you have not used steps before, they're really just like collapsible elements for your code, and it allows you to break things up into logical subdivisions of code. I really like them. For me, it's kind of like a forced way of having some level of commenting in my code, right? Because if I'm breaking things up into steps, I've given each step a name. There's obviously some kind of logic that's inside of that step. So as long as I've given it a helpful name, I should be in good shape to understand what was going on in there when I look at it later. So the first thing we want to do is launch page. So I'm going to put launch page and download CSV. I'm going to use an ampersand here. We'll see if that will cut down on our characters so this will display well. Like that. Okay, I'll hit save. Close enough. All right, so we've launched the page. We've downloaded the CSV. The next thing I want to do is actually read that CSV. So there's a couple different ways you could approach reading. We'll talk about that once we get into actually looping through that. But I'm going to do it in its own dedicated step. So I'm going to say read CSV. And then I'm going to enter form data. I'm just going to put enter data. And I'm going to put here in parentheses loop. And that's just a reminder for me that that's the part that I want to do a loop for, right? I'm going to enter that form data once per customer in my missing customer CSV. All right, and then the last thing, I always like to add a step at the end for cleanup. Depending on how you build your bot, you may do one or more things here. Again, we'll touch on that as we go through. So at this point, I have 4 steps, and you notice I'm hitting save after like every time. That's just a habit. It's probably a good habit to get into. You don't have to do that. You can move from step to step or action to action. It doesn't really matter if you hit save in between. All right, so I've got kind of the outline of what my bot's going to be. Now, the very first thing we need to do is launch that page and download our CSV. As a part of the rules that we talked about back on Monday, we said that the rules for this challenge is you have to download the CSV file every single time the bot runs. So we're going to make sure we hit on that. I'm going to come back here to the challenge page. Again, the URL is in the description below, so you can grab that. I'm going to copy that. And the first thing we're going to do is launch that page, right? Because I want to launch that page so that I can download the CSV. So I'm going to go up to the browser package and drag over the open action. And inside of that open action, I'm going to select my browser. I'm using Google Chrome. You don't have to use Google Chrome. You could use a different browser if you want. I'm using Chrome. It is my default browser, but just in case, I like to always be very specific about the browser that I select there. The link to open is going to be that full URL. So that's the URL of the challenge page, and we can hit save. So at this point, and again, we want to think about what the bot is going to see when it's actually running. The bot should have access to this this page right here, right? So it will have this open. So now I should be able to come here and download the CSV. So I'm going to move this off of that tab. So I've got my challenge page in a window that's behind my my browser right now. And what I'm going to do is, let's go to, well, there's two ways to do this, right? One way is I could use the download file action. Okay, and if I use download file, I have to have the URL of the file. If we switch back to that challenge page, notice that this is actually a link, right? So if I right click on this and says save link as, oh, not that, sorry, copy link address, sorry. I could actually put that right here, okay? And that allows me to save that file out and save it to some location. That's one way to approach this. I'm going to disable this right now because I'm going to do it the normal way that we would typically have people do this stuff. And we're going to use recorder. So I'm going to come down here for recorder and drag over a capture action. And then for browser, I'm going to hit refresh. I want to make sure that it knows about all of the browser tabs and windows that I have open. I'm going to come down and select my Automation Anywhere Labs Customer Onboarding as the name of my window. And then I can click this capture object. And notice that it moved the focus of my screen over to this other page. As I move around on this, do you see that little red box showing up outside of stuff as I mouse over it? So that's my selector, and that's basically me telling the Automation Anywhere extension that I have installed what object I want to interact with. So I clicked on it. It's going to record everything that it knows about that particular object. So if we scroll down here, we can see, hey, it's a link. It was in Chrome. I've got the HTML tag. I have the full DOMX path. These are all of the details that it knows about it. And actually, I can expand that even further to see every single detail it knows about that object. Only the object properties that are checked are the ones that are going to be considered when it's finding this object in the future. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it at the default for right now. In my action to take on object, if you click this drop down, I'm going to say click. Okay, and that's going to run a click on that particular button. That should download the file for me. So I'm going to hit save and we're good there. Now at this point, we should expect that we have opened the browser and we have downloaded the file. So let's go ahead and read the CSV. Now, just like with downloading, there's actually more than one way you could do this. The way that I like to do it is by using the CSV Txt Action here. So I'm going to first go to open. Okay, it's going to say, hey, what file do you want me to actually open up? And notice we're going to be setting a session there. That session will be important as we use our next step, which is to read. So this will be browsing to our desktop to find that file. I don't know if I actually have it downloaded or not. So I'm going to go to my downloads directory. I do have it. No, I don't have it. Yeah, missing customers right here. So I had that already. If you didn't have that already downloaded, you could either fake this path or you could just download the file real quick so that you have it, and then you'd be able to reference that file as a part of your bot. Okay, So if you didn't already have it, just go to this page, do a manual click here so you can download it, and that way you'll have it as needed. It does contain a header. We can open that up to verify. Sorry, I've got that on the screen here. Missing customers. I'm going to open this up. So why that matters is when we're going to do our looping through that file and we're going to read all of the data, when we say it has a header, we don't want to consider that header when we're doing our looping. At least I don't for this case. If you needed to consider the header as a part of your looping, then you'd want to leave that off. But notice this has, I guess, 7 total. Yeah, 7 customers. For each customer, we have a company name. We've got an ID, contact, city, state, street address, zip, email address, and then we have this offers discounts and non-disclosure on file. So we're going to use these with some conditional statements once we get to the bottom of filling our form. The rest of the stuff we're just going to basically enter exactly as it comes from this form. So I'm going to minimize that for right now because I don't need it. So I am going to say contains headers because that's important for our use case. Now, with that CSV open, I can now read that CSV. This is where I said there's actually multiple ways you could do this. One way you could do it is go straight into your looping, and you could just say, I'm going to start looping through this CSV as is with your loop action. You could drop that in here, and when you select what you're looping through, you could choose the CSV and do it that way. The way that I like to do it is actually read the CSV to a data table and then loop off of that data table. And that way I'm opening the CSV, reading it, and closing it all in one place. And I don't have to worry about like, oh, did I have a session open with that CSV? This becomes especially important when you're working with multiple CSV files. The same kind of approach can be used for Excel, but really I think this applies most for CSV files. So when I'm reading, it's saying, hey, what do you want to assign that value to, right? Which is the full content of my CSV file. I'm going to hit this plus sign here to create a new variable. And notice it's saving that as a table. I think I said data table, but it's saving it as a table, right? So I'm going to put here TBL, which is just my own prefix for table, so that when I'm looking at my variables, I know what type this is. I'm going to put TBL missing customers. And I'll hit create and select. I don't have to set anything else there because whatever is in that CSV is going to show up in my table for missing customers. The last thing I need to do here is close. And that's going to close me reading the file. It's also going to close that session. So if I needed to reuse another session called default for reading a CSV, I'd be able to do that. All right, I'm going to minimize these because we're done with these steps so far. And I'll hit save. Okay, so at this point, we need to enter the data from what is now our table into that web form. Okay, so the way that we're going to start with that is a loop. And I'm going to go to the loop and drag that over into my enter data loop step that I've created here. And for my iterator, like I said, you could do this directly off a CSV session if you still had that open. I did get rid of mine, so I don't have that open anymore. I closed it. What I'm going to do is for each row in a data table, okay, I choose my variable here, which is TBL missing customers. I then can set whether I want to have multiple variables, so each variable or each column, do I want to save that to a separate variable, or do I want to use a record variable? I'm going to use a record variable because I think these are the easiest to use. So I'm going to hit plus here on this create variable, and it's going to ask me to create a new variable of type record. So what I'm going to do is put a lowercase r, that's how I'm going to prefix my record, and I'm going to say current missing customer. And don't let the language of record fool you here. Really all that is it just means a row, right? So when we look at our Excel here, our CSV I should say, the first record would have all of these data elements, right? Basically that exact detail for the first customer. And I could reference the data elements within that record by name, right? Because I have a header value, or I could reference them by index, and that would be a zero-based index. So I could say, hey, this is element 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Going on like that. I usually do it off of index because I'm just always concerned about like, well, what if someone changed the header name? Yeah, that could be a problem. It would also be a problem if someone switched around the order of the columns, right? If I was using column name in that case, I'd actually be okay. But if I was using the index, then I'd kind of be in trouble. So either way would work, but I'm going to do it by index just because that's how I like to normally do it. I'm going to move this over here for just a second. I always build with 2 screens anyway. I usually have 1 screen for like the random files like this. It makes it a lot easier in my opinion while you're building. So I'm going to have that over there. All right, I'm going to save this. Again, just in case my browser crashes, it doesn't actually happen, but if I accidentally hit close too fast or something like that, I don't want to lose my progress. Okay, so at this point, we're ready to actually start filling data into our form. Now, again, like many things that we've done so far, there's a couple ways to approach this. The way that I'm going to do it is I'm actually going to use the recorder here. And I'm going to show you why I'm doing that here in a second. Another option would be to just use recorder here and drag in capture steps and capture each one of these fields one by one. That would work. I like doing it this way because I can do it all at once and it's a lot easier for me to go back through and fill them out to fill the data. Okay, so if you haven't done it this way, hang with me, do it this way so you can see what I'm talking about, and then you can do it your way if you like afterwards. So for my browser window, I'm going to select this Automation Anywhere Labs Customer Onboarding. I'm going to select to use Universal Recorder. So as I'm doing that, it's going to, just like we saw before, it's going to draw those red boxes on everything. As I click or as I type, both, right, it's actually going to record all of those steps and it's going to allow me to basically play that back. And I'd be able to view and see exactly what I was doing. So as I go through each of these, I'm actually going to type what the name of the field is. So I'm going to say customer name, and then I'm going to click in this next one and say customer ID. And then I'm going to click in this next one and say primary contact. And nothing is more exciting on a tutorial than me reading things out as I'm typing them. So I'll somewhat be quiet here. But basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to mark each of these fields with something so that as I'm seeing them in my workbench, I know exactly how I need to interact with that, right? So I'm going to select just a random state here. For zip code, I'll put it in zip. I want to be able to find these so that I know exactly what data to use to fill them in. And I'm actually good on that. So I don't need any more of those. I've got my email filled out. I did all of my customer name and things like that. So I'm going to hit finish. And now I've got a bunch of recorder steps all one after another. Okay, all the way down to this should be my email. All right. So I'm going to select all of those and I'll show dual mode here. I know that some people build in list mode and some people do it on flow view like I do. I kind of switch between, but to be honest, I'm building in flow view most of the time. I know that makes me a monster to some people, but that's how I get down with the builds. So I'm going to switch back to flow because what I did is just shift click and select all of those, and then I move them inside of my loop because I need to do that data entry once per line of my table. So I'm going to switch back to flow view just so we have like the most visibility. And when I click on this, I'm going to see that it has basically everything that I need already. It's got the details related to what field that was. It's got a DOM-X path. It has the HTML ID. But here for the enter keystrokes, it says customer name. That's not what I want. So I'm going to delete customer name out, but I know that this is the field for customer name. So I'm going to press F2, and that will bring up my Variables Explorer. And on my Variables Explorer, I actually want to use my row, which is current missing customer, right? Our current missing customer. And it's going to say, hey, you can reference this by name or by index. The index is start at 0. If we bring my spreadsheet over here again, 0 is my company name, 1 is my customer ID, 2 is my primary contact. So if we follow that same pattern, we can just copy this variable out and fill this in to the remaining recorder steps. So this one is customer ID. Customer ID is index 1 from my CSV, so I can fill that in. And I can really move pretty quickly through these. If I had to do them all individually, like just dragging over a capture step and then filling it in, this can go a lot more slowly. But as long as I get these indexes right, I should be good. Again, like I mentioned, alternatively, you could use the header detail for that. So if I didn't want to use the index, I could use the header detail, but I'm just going to use indexes for these. So before 1, 2, 3. Okay, so street address is 3. City is 4. And again, it's zero-based indexing, so just make sure that it's going to probably be one off from what you actually think. Now, state's a little bit tricky. State is actually a drop-down. So everything else we've been doing so far is just fill the text into this field. State is actually a drop-down. And so you would think that that's going to be really complicated to figure out, like, oh, do I have to click down arrow to get to the number of states and know what it is? It's actually not that bad. So instead of a left click here, which is the action that it recorded, notice that it did left click here, and then it recorded that I had a second click, which was actually on the control object itself. I'm actually going to delete this second one because I don't need that click one. I just want the one where I did the left click on state. I'm going to click this, and notice that I have a bunch of different actions I can use here, and that's because Automation Anywhere is recognizing that the object I'm interacting with is actually a drop-down. So I have a lot of different options I can interact with a drop-down on. And I'm going to say select item by text. Okay? So I'm going to supply the text here that I want to be selected from the drop-down. Now, obviously this works as long as the text that I'm feeding it actually exists as a drop-down item. If I gave it the word Hawaii and that was not in the drop-down list, then that's not going to work. But if I gave it the code, I think the state code for Hawaii is HI. I probably should use the state I actually know. Let's say North Carolina, right? If I selected North Carolina, that may not be there, but NC is in that list. So I need to make sure that wherever my data source is, in this case, it's my state column here, as long as all of these are, the 2-character state codes, and as long as that's what my drop-down has, then I should be good to go. So that was a really long explanation to say, let's just put index 5 here as my selected text. All right, after state comes zip. Again, following our same pattern, that's going to be index 6. And then email is the last of our standard text fields, and that's going to be index 7. Okay, so we've got all of the basic form data. Now we have to worry about checking those. Is it a radio box? So we've got a radio button here, which is a yes or a no. I can't check both, right? So I need to get one or the two of those. And then I need to optionally check this non-disclosure agreement on file based on what the person has or what that customer has for their column here. So what I'm going to do is let's go back to our bot building. And I'm going to do a conditional statement. So a conditional statement allows me to apply logic if a condition resolves to true and if it doesn't resolve to true, or in multiple conditions. So I'm going to select here, we want to say string. And my source is going to be, let's say F2. Actually, we can paste it. It's on our clipboard. Current missing customer, which is my row, and it's going to be index 8. Let me count that again to make sure. Yeah, 8. So if that equals to yes, and I'm going to take off match case here. I don't like using case sensitivity if I don't have to. If that equals to yes, then what do I want to do? And if offers discount is equal to yes, then I want to check that box on the yes or the yes radio button. So I'm going to grab capture. I'm going to move that over here. Oops, let's try one more time. There we go. I'm going to select browser. From this dropdown, I'm going to use the previously selected browser window, which is my Automation Anywhere Labs customer onboarding. I'm going to click this button that says capture object. And I'm going to highlight over just this little yes radio button right there. Okay. And the action I want to take, again, this is a little bit different than other objects because this is a radio button instead of a button or instead of a text field. I'm going to set select. Let's do that one. Yeah, let's do select. And then I'll hit save. Now, if that is not equal to yes, then I want to click the other one, which is the no active discount thing. So what I'm going to do is go back up to my if statement, and I'm going to drag an else condition over here. Okay, and so if that offers discount is not equal to yes, then I'm going to do the else, and I'm just going to paste in what we had already used here, which is I just did a Control C on this one and a Control V over here to paste in that recorder step, and I'm just going to click recapture object. And this time I'm going to highlight over that no. And again, I'll leave the select action to take as select, and I'm good to go. So I have that part covered. The last conditional statement we want to use is a non-disclosure on file? And if it is, then we want to check that radio button, or I'm sorry, not the radio button, the checkbox. So another conditional statement right after this. Again, these are independent conditional statements, right? I could have put this one inside of this one, but it really wouldn't make sense that way, right? Because this is a totally independent question from the is current customer. So make sure that you're paying attention to that, and you can kind of tell that by the colors here, especially in flow view. In list view, when you see these, if I had it like put right in here, you would see that it's a nested object. So you don't want to do that. I want it to be back at that other level. So I'm going to switch back to flow view so I can make sure I get that right. Yeah, I want it down here. There we go. All right. So this is going to be similar to the condition I had before. Again, it's going to be string. This one is going to be index 9, which is my non-disclosure on file. And if that is equal to yes, again, I'm going to turn off match case. If it's equal to yes, I'm going to have another capture step. So let's put that in there. Browser, grab the one we just used, and then capture object. Highlight just over that little checkbox. And for my action, I can say check, which is what I want to do. I'm going to check that box. And then the very last thing we need to do in our enter data step here is we want to click the button to actually hit register customer. And again, I want this to be outside of my conditional statement. Okay, it's got to be outside of my conditional statement, but inside of my loop. Okay, so notice my loop is right here. I want to make sure I'm clicking that register every single time as a part of the loop, but I want it to be outside of my conditional statements here. Okay, so just make sure you have that correct, because that could trip some people up. I'm going to go to browser here. I'm going to select that lab page, click capture object, scroll down a little bit, and click that register button. And for my action to take, I'm going to click click. Just a quick pro tip here, click or left click, the difference. If I just do click, it's actually executing the JavaScript on that particular object for a click. If I use left click, it's actually going to move my mouse over there and perform a real click. So depending on the application you're using, if click isn't working, try left click. I always try to default to click though, because the less my mouse is moving around, I feel like it's the better for my automation stability. So I'm going to hit save. And then the last thing we're going to do is clean up. Now for me, I want to delete that file every single time. So I'm going to go to the file here and delete. And I want to get rid of that, what was it called? Missing customer CSV. So I'm going to hit browse. I'll go out to my downloads directory and grab missing customers CSV, hit open. That's just going to delete the file somewhat, not arbitrarily. It's going to delete that file because I don't want that file anymore. I'm going to close it here on my side because I don't need it. I'm going to delete it. That way the next time that I run the bot, I know that it's always going to be working off of what, the newest copy of that. Which brings us to one last thing I want to bring up to you. Let me scroll up here to the very top. Because there's one thing that we probably should do that we didn't have. So notice right here, we're clicking to download that CSV. If I do that click, it's going to take probably a second to a half second to actually download the file. If it's some other exercise or some other page, that could take quite a bit longer. This one's usually pretty snappy. But keep that in mind. I don't want to go directly into a command where I'm going to be reading a file that may not exist yet. So what I'm going to do is add just a short delay in here after I click to download the file. and I'm going to put it at, let's say 2 seconds. That should be enough to make sure that I'm able to download the file. Actually, yeah, 2 seconds is fine. All right, so I'm going to go back here and close the exercise page because again, my bot should be opening that up, and then I'm going to hit run. So at this point, my bot should hopefully launch the browser, download that file, read the file, enter all of the data after looping through the file, and then delete the file at the very end. And we should hopefully see a decent accuracy as well as a decent time. 100% accuracy is what we're shooting for. Anything less is not really that helpful. Okay, so notice that it's keeping track of my correctly submitted fields there below the register button. So as I'm watching, I at least know how I'm doing. So far I'm 40 for 40, so that's good. Okay, cool. So that took exactly 27 seconds. I have an accuracy of 100%, and obviously I have the option to share this on social media. It's going to pre-create a tweet for me that says, hey, I completed that RPA challenge. I can share that out. Again, we're going to be giving out swag this entire month. So if you want your chance to win an Automation Anywhere limited edition bot game shirt or something like that, go out and share this. Share this on LinkedIn, share this on Twitter, share this and tag other RPA developers who you challenge to also complete this thing, okay? I'm going to close out of this though because I'm not going to tweet it right now. The one other thing I want to bring up here. So I had a time of 27 seconds. Likely this week you've seen some times that have been faster than that. So I'll quickly address some of the ways that people are getting that done. We'll have maybe another build later on where we get into like how to build the ultimate fastest solution ever. But for right now, I just wanted to teach you the basic way that I would typically tell people to get that done. So couple things that you could do to shave time on this one. The first would be, notice that we use this capture step, right? We clicked on download CSV. For me to click download CSV, the page has to be open. Alternatively, we could have used this browser download file, right? Because we had the URL for the file. I don't think I have that page. Yeah, I have the page open here. So what I could do is if I copied this link address and put that right here, I could still save this to the same location, right? Which would be my downloads. And I'm just going to grab a random file here because I'm going to rename it here in a second. It would be, in this case, missingcustomers.csv. So I could save it here. And technically, because I'm doing a browser download file action, I wouldn't need this one, obviously. I could do this before the browser is actually even open, okay? So I could do it that way. That would help me to shave a little bit of time off of this. I could also get rid of this delay at that point because it's gonna take a second for the browser to open. My 2-second delay may have been too much. I maybe could shave another second or two off if I got rid of that delay. That would be another option. Another way that you could approach this is going through and using keystrokes, right? So we had a separate capture step for every single one of those fields. Alternatively, what I could have done is had a capture step just for me to enter the data into this customer name. And then just like if I were filling out the form, right? I would put customer name, and then I'd hit tab, and then I'd put the customer ID, and then tab. So you could simulate keystrokes through a lot of this form, and that would also help to speed things up. There's, obviously I would have the trickiness of when I come to the state, I'd probably still have to use a capture step here to select the state, but then I could get back to my tabbing to go through the zip and the email. I could technically even tab through these options if I wanted to. Actually, you know what? No didn't show up as a tab, so I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd have to hit left or right. So you could probably do it with keystrokes. It would just get a little bit tricky, but that's another way that you could shave some more time off of this challenge. Tomorrow, there's going to be a bot store review video that we're going to release, which is the web automation package. Check that out. That's another way that you could technically speed up this bot build. And you could use that web automation package to cruise through some of this and go much faster than what we did here. It's just another option, okay? So lots of different ways to solve these problems. Hopefully this was helpful for you to see the way that I solved it. You might have done it slightly differently. You might have opened the CSV and looped through it directly. All of those things are fine. We just want to make sure that as you're going through this, you're considering things like, well, if I go super fast, what does that mean for the application I'm automating on? I don't want my bot to go faster than the application is actually able to keep up with. Okay? So hopefully had fun with this one. I'm super excited for the rest of this month. We're going to be doing more and more great Automation Anywhere Bot Wars challenges. So I'm excited for you to try those out. They're going to get harder from here. So I want you to be challenged. I want you to learn some new things. Hopefully you're learning from these sessions. Okay? Go be great. My name is Micah Smith. I'll see you in the next one.